This is the most stacked group that I think we have seen to date.
I really think that this is going to be one of the best games that we see.
They have found this formula for success. What's going on, guys? And welcome to Desserto's Curveball preview show presented by DJ Esports, the world's premier all-crypto esports betting site providing real-time odds. And today, we're going to be discussing the VALORANT Champions Tour 2021 Stage 3 Masters Berlin. My name is James Banks, and I'm your host as always. But to guide us through all of this, to discuss everything that's been going on, I've got Mitch and I've got fRoD. And Mitch, I know you're going to be all about the EU madness, but I know fRoD is going to be slapping you back down because NA seem to be a little bit tougher, don't they, fRoD?
Oh yeah, and the thing too is, man, the gods graced us with an easy bracket, potentially setting it up for a top 3 format. I mean, what more can I ask for, you know?
Well,
Mitch.
in a pretty good spot, huh, fRoD? It must feel nice. Well, what's going to feel even better when all the odds are stacked against the EMEA teams and we still come and smack you guys around to take that trophy.
I love you guys. This is exactly why I just set you up to have this little bit of fun. And then when the results roll through, Mitch has to cry a little and has to take it on the chin a bit. And I guess we have to start with this, that it went from a 16-team event to just a 15-team event because sadly, Bren Esports, they couldn't get their visas in time. This is sometimes just what happens in esports. It can be quite difficult. It's a big shame we're not going to have them here. But I guess for me, it's a shame we don't have the 16 teams. It makes one group a little bit more lopsided. Mitch, I want you to break down what happened in the format, first of all, for this event, but also the draw, because obviously we saw a bit of a shuffle up, obviously, how this all turned out in terms of which teams went to which group.
Yeah, so in terms of the draw, it looks like the teams from each region, the number 1 teams, were given a much heavier weight than I think most of us would give to some of these regions. I think you look at LATAM, you look at Brazil, and you think, like, do they weigh up to the North American? Do they weigh up to the European, the Korean talent that's out there? And I'm not quite sure that they do. Obviously, that then means that, but let me caveat that a little bit. I don't think that they will, but none of us can prove that they're not up to par. So it makes sense that for now it's treated that way. This will be something I imagine coming into next year. They'll look back on how all the teams from different regions performed throughout this year and then start to rethink, you know, who is the number 1 region, who is number 2. So there's a lot on the line for these teams even fighting for the future of their region to still have a certain number of slots or to have more slots and so on. When it comes to the final group, the 4th group of Group D, obviously we had Bren there. They couldn't make it, but it was so short notice by the time that, you know, there was a deadline set. They had to have visas and travel, and Riot were helping with that, but I understand that it wasn't very easy to make work within their country, so sadly they couldn't make it. But by the time that they hit that deadline, it was too late to bring another team to get COVID tests, to get visas, to get flights booked and quarantines and all that sort of stuff. So unfortunately, it meant that they couldn't be playing around, and so instead we have to have this sort of round robin group. Everyone's going to play each other twice, see what happens there, who comes out on top. It's a really tough one for the teams, though. You think about how this is going to affect them. They're now playing a completely different format within the opening stages, although I do still think that the 2 kind of favorites stand strong in there.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, this is going to be a big improvement from Iceland, but I still think there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to the format. I mean, this is going to be much more spectator friendly. We're going to get to see all the matches, see pretty much everything play out in a much more like elongated format, and see the results play out better. But at the same time, as you're basically saying, that some of these opening round matches or some of these groups, they could be a lot more balanced if they just sort of like reseed in general rather than put it like regional based, simply because it's very hard to tell exactly which regions will have the most impact in their game, especially when they're maybe more prominent in different games, you know, so the talent is very spread thin in some of those regions. So I think this is something that, yeah, Riot definitely should go back and look at and kind of see where they should maybe put some of these regions together, or maybe just balance out some of the invites that go out, and then hopefully they reseed or have some sort of council or group that can kind of give them the seedings for these groups going on, because the seeding and the groups really sets the tone for the tournament. And you know, in some of these cases it does put it in a, I don't want to say a bad light, but in something that it could definitely be a lot better for sure.
And I also, fRoD, I know you're agreeing with me on this one, is that when it comes to the playoff stages, I really want double elimination, you know, like to get out of groups is one thing, but then you go in, you're in a single elimination format. And I will praise Riot in the sense that they made adjustments to the initial format that came out. They certainly acted very fast on it all, but it's like, please give us a couple more days of event and also give us that double elimination format so we really see a true test of a team, because one best of 3 shouldn't define it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole double elimination format would be optimal simply because you get to see all the games and see people have more of those opportunities. I guess this is one of those like time crunch situations that they really have to just try and get the tournament going. But I mean, if we really want to have like the best team, best result all the time, double elimination is always the way to go. And I'm hoping that in the future, they really implement some of these things.
But looking at these groups, and Mitch, I'll let you kick things off here. What would you consider to be like the group of death now when it comes to it?
Oh, Group A, 100%. That first group up is absolutely stacked. You not only have the second and third placing, I don't want to say best, but second and third placing EMEA teams, but then you also have Vision Strikers in there as well, the number one in Korea that has been for quite some time. They've obviously added a couple of extra elements to that roster in the form of Lakia, the 6-man rotating roster, and what they're going to debut coming into Masters. I don't even want to imagine. So this is the most stacked group that I think we have seen to date.
And that's what we want to see.
Yeah, and I could definitely agree with that. I mean, Group A is completely stacked. I mean, unfortunately, you have 2 of EMEA's strongest teams pretty much going at it immediately, so that's going to be very tough. But I think that if they can make it out that group, then they'll be set up for further success down the bracket as well, since so many top teams are going to be eliminated, potentially getting out of these groups. And you know, if the EMEA teams can make it out and Vision Strikers not, I mean, that's going to be massive in itself, because I really think that Vision Strikers is one of the best teams out there. But these are some of the best teams coming out of EMEA, and unfortunately they're put in the first group right out the gate.
Yeah, it's all eyes on what Vision Strikers can do and how they can stand strong against this. But, you know, there's a lot of hope in there for the Korean sides of it all. Group B to me looks like a little bit easier, you know, a bit more comfortable to predict. But when we come to Group C, Mitch, I'm like, okay, Gambit, 100 Thieves, you guys should make it out. But I'm just excited to see that game go down alone when they get to face each other.
Yeah, well, that's presuming they make it past, obviously, the Having Liberty and Crazy Raccoons, which I think they should be able to do. So that upper bracket match within the Group C is going to be very, very exciting, or the winner's match. I think that Gambit will easily 2-0 100 Thieves, but we better at least paint an exciting picture.
Yeah, and exactly that. I mean, that's going to be one of those games that whichever one advances out, they'll most likely still make it out of their group, and they could potentially set up for a rematch later on down the line, maybe like in the semifinals or something if they advance out of their first game. So I really think that this is going to be one of the best games that we see throughout the whole entire tournament, at least just from the perspective of Gambit being one of the best teams in the EMEA, 100 Thieves having that kind of experience mixed with young talent. And then to me, I think that the other group that's kind of interesting to watch is really that Group D, because of the whole, like, since you don't have that extra team and everyone's going to have to play round robin twice. I mean, we're going to get graced with Sentinels and G2 2 times. So I mean, I think for me, that's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's not even close to being a group of death, but it's just one of those, like, probably the most interesting group out there, because it's going to be basically, you're going to get the best teams coming out from that group, and then, you know, they're going to advance out. Only one team doesn't make it out.
Well, let's start talking about the groups, right, and start going through them. And I want to look at Group A here, because I guess, Mitch, when it comes to SuperMassive Blaze, we were very impressed what this team came up with. But do we think that they can do it all again now when the pressure's high? Do you think they've got enough experience under their belt to be able to deal with such a pressure of being on LAN and being at an event like this?
Well, you know, these guys have played before, right? A lot of these players will have played LAN in the past. I don't think it's going to be a massive issue for them just being in the arena. But when you look at how they beat Acend last time, it was a super tight game. They ended up taking it on the third map, but you could easily see a turnaround there. And watching that game, it didn't really feel like Acend were at 100%. So whilst even in my pick'ems, I've said SuperMassive Blaze go through just because on paper, last time they beat them, and we're relying on Acend changing rather than SuperMassive Blaze. If SuperMassive Blaze also raised their game, we're in for a treat of a game, that's for damn sure. So I think that they're the ones that should be winning at least their opening matchup against Acend. But it's going to be damn tight, and a really tough opening as well. I mean, I saw Crimson over on Twitter tweeted out, wow, I can't believe we got second place and have to face SuperMassive Blaze. We should have gotten third place instead, so we could face SuperMassive Blaze.
It doesn't work out sometimes, does it? It's painful in that sense.
Yeah, that's why I think that the group format is kind of silly like that, because you're basically putting teams that have a lot of history against each other, opening up the tournament against each other. So it's gonna kind of be, it's gonna be strange. But in my opinion, this is where I think, like, this is where I think the cNed difference might take over. Like, I want SuperMassive Blaze to win that game, but I feel like cNed is just going to take over that game, not only because it's on LAN, but it's just like maybe he has a lot of experience playing against SuperMassive Blaze. Maybe he's going to put all of that together with the addition of LAN, putting pressure on them, being very aggressive against them. I mean, you never know where it goes, but I think whoever wins that game possibly beats Vision Strikers, and then it'll end up being a Vision Strikers versus the other one after, simply because the momentum might carry over depending on how they play. The thing is, like, for me, I think the reason why, if SuperMassive Blaze goes through, I'm not sure if they beat Vision Strikers, but I think that with cNed and Acend, that they stack up better against Vision Strikers, like when it comes to play style and just how Acend kind of plays. So I think that that's going to be very interesting to watch. And if, like I said, I think Acend might be the team that kind of makes it out first in the group, potentially with Vision Strikers being second. I'd like it. I mean, it's kind of tough because I have such a good history with like Can, for example, and I want them to go through. Yeah. But it's like, I feel like Acend is one of those almost locks in my opinion. And then in between SuperMassive Blaze and Vision Strikers, it's very, very close. And I almost want to edge SuperMassive Blaze because I've been on that hype train, but it's tough for me at least. I think this group's really hard to call in that sense, because like Vision Strikers, right, in Korea, they've been on LAN for a long time. Everything's been set up for these guys. They've been playing out in these studios. That's going to be very comfortable for them. But I think we touched on it last time, Mitch, right? I know they're doing the 6-man roster, but I really want to see Lakia come through and just be there, like, all-star studded performance, style on them if Vision Strikers want to have a chance of it.
Yeah, they actually have a lot of power, Vision Strikers, coming into this, because not only have they picked up Lakia, but they've shown very little of him. They've had him on Sky on one map. Now things can change around. In the time period that we've had, I imagine they're going to add him in to more and more maps. And if you think about it, Vision Strikers already have a plan A. They already have a way of playing every single map with their core roster. Now they've done this is the one team that's made a 6-man roster that I agree with, because they've made a solid team and then added in a stupidly strong player, which first of all stops him from being on any other team in Korea, which I think is the objective of them picking him up. But secondly, allows him to then be basically a second composition. It's like when we would have those second agents that you would see some teams run, like a secondary agent composition, and we'd be like, oh, well, that kind of throws off the preparation that the other team has done. Well, now you come in, you don't even know, never mind the agents, you don't know what players you're going to play against. And they have to submit that before they go into the games. They have to say like, oh, on Split, we're going to play with this lineup. On Haven, we're going to play with this lineup. They have to tell the admins that in advance. They can't make the changes during the series. But that's almost like that's a scary thing in and of itself. The fact that they will have meticulously planned on each map which player they're putting out there, so you can't even start to read into tendencies necessarily. Because even making that one change, that one little roster swap from their normal to putting Lakia in for whichever player he would sub in for on a given map, changes the entire team when it's somebody as explosive as Lakia. If it was just like a bog standard player you're putting in, okay, the rest of the team might kind of play the same. But Lakia isn't going to go in and go, okay, I'll play this guy's role, I'll do what he does. No, he's going to come in and own it completely, change the way the team plays, and that's going to be very, very tough to play against.
In a big, big way. So, Group A, quite open. We may be thinking EMEA has a chance of going double to qualify through to the playoff stages, but Vision Strikers could come through, and I think I'd love to see Korea make it to that playoff spot, right, and do some damage, but we'll have to wait and see. I
got Vision Strikers top in the group.
You got them top in the group. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna throw my EU bias. I've always said I was EU and Korea biased. I love Korea as well. I've been dying to see these guys.
You needed something else to hope for.
So then, which of the C, SuperMassive Blaze or Acend, which one do you think makes it out in that second game, that rematch? Because they basically rematch.
I have SuperMassive Blaze making it out purely because they won last time. They did it in not the most convincing manner, but I think Acend will bounce back. They'll look a lot better coming into this. But I don't discount the Turks doing the same. I mean, these guys put in more work than I think anyone out there. You've got Russ, who was the replacement for cNed when cNed originally left the BBL roster, and he's not even playing Jet. They've got Izzy playing Jet. So if the guy who replaced cNed to a pretty damn good standard isn't even your Jet player, woo, you got some damn skill.
They have some of the best teamwork in the whole entire tournament, like by far. Sure. So it's one of those things that for me, I'm so excited to see that game. For me, Group A is one of those that like it's a must see pretty much all games.
Oh yes, that's the beauty of what we got here when we get everyone to Berlin. But looking at Group B, guys, like for me, You look at Zeta, you look at Envy, and then you think it should be easy, but it's more which one's going to be coming out on top, because Envy seem to be gifted here. fRoD, you were touching on, right, and saying that, like, oh yeah, Envy are looking good. We're happy with the position they put themselves into. They've managed to make it here. But do we think this is a group they can top?
Yeah, when it comes to like NA teams outside of Sentinels, Envy is one of the strongest looking teams, especially with their addition of Ye. I mean, it's just been like a whole different feeling, and kind of what we said earlier about teams. Like, there's not much that you have to study about Envy with Ye. I mean, there's really only that one tournament, and they scrimmed about like, you know, a 1 week prior to that. Now, I think that when they get pretty much gifted the easiest group of the whole entire tournament, if they can find a way to just run through this group, do it based on skill, not even really expose any sort of strategy or anything like that, there's going to be even less information for people to study them on. So I think that that's going to help segue to potentially a more dominant bracket run, simply because of the confidence that you can get from the group stage. But for me, I think that this is one of those that I'm not too big of a fan of how, like when we touched on it earlier about like the whole format of different rankings from different regions getting put into a specific group. Like, this is one of those groups that I think that in some sort of way it could have been balanced a little bit better, but I'm not going to complain, because for me it's set up for Envy to go right on through. And then, to be honest, between it's probably going to end up being Zeta. They're just going to, you know, go in there and take over the second spot. But I mean, Envy's going to be set up for a first place run, and then they're going to have to, you know, they'll potentially be set up to play, you know, second place from a different group, and from there it's set up fairly easy for them to just potentially make it into the top 5 or top 3 of a tournament of the major.
Put some damn respect on the Japanese players' names. God damn it. Envy making an easy run for first place in this group. Are you serious? Zeta are going to slap them around. Oh my. I mean, this is the 3rd team coming out of NA. The fact you think they're going to top the group, I mean, it's cute. It really is. Loyalty to your region. But I'm telling you, Zeta, they're coming out on top. I wouldn't be surprised if Vivo Keyed took Envy down, but I'm gonna play nice here.
Here we go. Now he's losing his mind. Rate it in, boy. Rate it in.
I'll say Envy make it through the losers bracket, because that's what NA are.
Bro, you know what? One thing is, I can be with you, Mitch, when it comes to your EMEA bias on this. But like, let's be fair. You then took Korea. Now you've gone for Japan. Like, you just get any team you can find that can get a slight advantage against NA. Is that what you're rolling with here, mate?
Hey, I wanted to see Absolute Jupiter back in the day as well, instead of Crazy Raccoons. I mean, now we get to see them in the form of Zeta, obviously. I think this is a team. They've been around a long time. They've got some insane players. Takish especially is just, I've definitely mispronounced that, is absolutely nuts. We get little files before the events. Riot make these like documents that have an audio cue from each coach on how to pronounce their players' names. That is very much appreciated. Otherwise, I'm Irish, you know, I would be making an ass of myself with anybody from outside Western Europe. Not even like go to Eastern Europe, I'm messing it up. So I think Zeta are gonna top it for sure. That's not even biased necessarily, as much as I'd love to see NA teams fail. I really just I think
I don't know if I can take you seriously. I don't know, like I thing is, I can look at this and be like, Envy top this group quite comfortably. Like, it might be a good match against Zeta, goes 3 maps or whatever, sure, fine, but like I would say Zeta will struggle a bit more.
So my thing is, like, I was gonna say I could see a world, but I'm not really sure I could see that world. But I kind of understand where Mitch is getting at, in the sense that, you know, Zeta is one of those teams, just like Vision Strikers in Korea, that they have their own identity, and they've always had their own identity. Like, even from the beta, they've evolved their game style like consistently. This is like, these are the regions that when you watch them play, you can pick up some things. You can learn a couple things here and there, and you can analyze them, and you can see the skill that shines through their gameplay. And I'm not gonna try and call out other regions and stuff that I think that are still a little bit, I would say, stuck in the times and are still playing like beta comps.
You just have to watch the games.
You just watch the games. Look, you said it, not me. But at the same time, I want the game to evolve, and I want the metas to kind of evolve. And for me, the Korean and Japanese scene are 2 of the scenes that you see constant innovation. So for me, as long as they bring that to there, it might surprise Envy a little bit. Now, I think that Envy does have the skill to overcome whatever is thrown at them, but I think that if there is a team that can provide that element of surprise, it's going to have to be from one of those regions.
A reminder that Curveball is presented by DJ Esports, where you can choose from over 30,000 unique bets with up-to-minute live odds. Sign up now with the link in the description and get 400 DJT completely free. Grab your hands on that, and we'll continue to work our way through these groups, because guys, we got to make sure we look at Group C, which to me, I know we said about it, like looking at Group A and how competitive it can be with the 2 MEA teams in there. But Group C is where my heart lies, because I predicted 100 Thieves last time to do pretty well. They're looking good in the NA region, but they've also got Gambit in this group as well. And I feel like Gambit, put them on LAN, put them on low ping, Mitch. It's going to be absolute carnage. This is where my little bit of bias will sneak in, because I'm a big Nads fan. I was talking to him on Instagram, you know, and he was saying about they've got to the boot camp area now, right? They're quarantining. And he was just amazed at being on like 15 to 20 ping, let alone when you put him on the LAN client. And we already know what this guy can do.
It's another thing about, you know, we talked about SuperMassive Blaze earlier. The Turks, they experienced the same thing playing on high ping. I think Gambit have a little bit worse, though, a lot of the time. Looking at these guys, the one downside I can see is that they are a very, very young team. And you'll know, both of you guys will know from being young guys at LAN, there's a lot of emotion that goes along with it. It's very different to playing those online tournaments. But then you add in the fact that they're from the CIS, and that stops mattering. I mean, you look at Nats when he's winning these, like when he qualified for this event, the team is jumping, the coaches are going crazy, there's people coming in the room. I think it's their family were coming in the room, you had crowds, everyone's cheering, he's just like, yeah, I think we qualified.
I win.
They all remind me of Cooler from back in the day.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going into different genres now. Even I like it.
Hey, I'm a CIS fanboy, always been. So that's kind of my thing. Like, I'm with you guys here. Like, obviously, I'm like very fortunate that we have 100 Thieves. I think is going to be clear cut making it through out of that group. But for me, it's like Gambit is going to be a sight to see. I was super disappointed that they did not make it to Iceland. And kind of what you were saying earlier, like the CIS, Turkish region, like these are regions that they have such a ping disadvantage when they're competing in their own regions. So for them, every time when they get on LAN, it's almost like they're unlocked in like different levels. So I think when you look at some previous teams and different games or different history that have done similar, like the Navis and things like that, as long as these guys go to LAN, have that same play style, have that same exact confidence, they'll be more than fine. Because I feel like that is something that a lot of players miss out on, the ability to just perform the same or do the same and have the same confidence that you did online. If these guys can have that same thing on LAN, the difference that these guys from these regions being that just like cold-blooded and just like emotions don't really get to them as much, that's going to be such a massive advantage when all the pressure's on the line. And I think that, you know, it's going to be something that these guys, I mean, I want Gambit to kind of win this group and have it easy and make it to top 3. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's a team I'm definitely going to be rooting for the whole entire time.
And I would say, right, when it comes to this, like for me, one thing people forget is even with the players being young, like you were saying, Mitch, Gambit as an organization right now is like really far up there. Like they don't have massive amounts of squads, they're not competing every single game, right? They're not dominating their region in terms of winning everything, but they have found this formula for success. If you look at their Counter-Strike team, you now look at the team you've had here in Valorant, like they understand what it takes to take these young guys and turn them into pros, and the support staff need a hell of a lot of credit on Gambit for sure. Yeah,
well, you look at Gambit youngsters, right? We literally saw them at one of their first LAN events, and they absolutely destroyed it. You know, they looked fantastic. This is an organization that knows how to breed young talent, how to really get them to the position that they're comfortable when it comes to LAN environments, that they don't get affected by any of this sort of social aspects and emotional aspects of the game. To me, they're the favorite in the tournament. I think Gambit are going to win the whole thing, and that's not even like necessarily a bias situation. I love watching them. I genuinely don't think I've seen a game from Gambit where I've been like, oh, these guys, you know, they're playing loose, they're messing around, whatever, where I didn't enjoy it.
They don't know that.
Yeah, from a deep tactical perspective, I've loved watching every single game that they've played, and I think that not only will they top this group, I think they'll breeze through to that grand final.
Yeah, and I think it's like a culture thing. Like, it's one of these things that it's like the vibe that they bring, like the Gambit culture, the CIS culture. I mean, like, I think in my opinion, this is like a whole different topic that could probably bring a whole other podcast, is kind of like how a lot of organizations, or even especially in NA, they're kind of being rotten from the top down, whether it's like owners of organizations or managers of teams. They just have no idea what they were doing, or they were maybe flipping burgers a couple years ago. You know, you have organizations that, like Gambit, for example, that these are some of the best players in their region for the last 15-20 years, legends in their space, that they are CEOs, managers,
Yep.
everybody from the top down breeds excellence, but also understanding what it's like to be one of these players, what it's like to go through what they go through on a day-to-day basis. So every single person, the one thing that these players on Gambit has an advantage that other teams don't have is they can talk to probably any single person in that staff and they have more experience than them. So they could relate right out the bat, and there's none of this like, well, I don't know, you don't know what I go through. And that's something that I think that a lot of teams don't value or don't really notice that, because this is an inexperienced team and a young team that has some of the most experienced and legendary people and players in their region guiding them on a day-to-day basis. And that, in my opinion, is what pays dividends in the long run.
I would say the other thing with Gambit as well that we have to look at here is when you come from a region like the CIS, like esports in a way is such an escape from the reality of where they live, right? The money and poverty in a lot of these kind of countries. It's not like everyone's super poor. Maybe some of them didn't have it too bad, but it's like, it's such life changing with like not as big a money needed. Like in terms of their salaries, nowhere near as blown up as like the NA players and stuff. But these guys want it so bad because this is a way to completely change it. And that's why you're speaking about like the people who run the organization. They found this success in it and then put it back in and said, okay, how do we make this further? Like, how do we take it to
they've dedicated their whole lives to this, and they're dedicating their next life to growing other talent and,
love it.
Yeah, it's amazing what they're doing. So that's why I give my props to Gambit as a whole, the organization. And when you tie in the fact that these players are so amazing, I mean, it's a recipe for success right there.
So let's take a look at the final group in here. And this is the wild one with Sentinels, G2 and F4Q. Now, they all have to play each other, right? And it goes round in the circle. They have to play each other twice. It means we're blessed with some great games for sure. Sentinels, pretty sure. We're just going to say they're probably going to rock it. Maybe they slip and drop a map, but overall, I don't see them losing best of threes. G2 though, Mitch, how much of a challenge can they put up? And should they be worried about F4Q?
I think so. I said earlier that I think the top two in this group should still be the favorites in making it through, even with the format changes. But then I caught myself and thought, actually, I think F4Q are pretty decent. From what I understand, it's kind of like not a series of pro team as you'd expect. I don't think they were expected to make it through regionally. So they could do some damage, especially when you consider the fact that G2 more recently have looked a little bit sloppy. I mean, closing out the EMEA playoffs, they definitely didn't look near the level that we know that they can reach. And for the super team that they're supposed to be, the level wasn't hit. Now, they have time to prepare and all that sort of stuff as we keep bringing up for all these teams. So there's no telling what form they'll enter the tournament in. But if it's the same as EMEA playoffs, I think there's absolutely a chance for F4Q to make it through in their place.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing for me too is like G2 is one of those teams that I think that they get stronger as it goes on. So for example, if they play Sentinels, I think that they'll lose to Sentinels their first game. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to adapt enough and change their play style enough to be able to beat them that second time. My issue when it comes to Sentinel or G2 versus F4Q is if F4Q beats them that first time, I'm not sure if G2 beats them that second time. And it's going to basically come down to F4Q and G2, which one of those, I think it's going to be a split between those. And then it's going to come down to tiebreaker to see which one of those two makes it out. Whoever performed better against Sentinels is going to be the one that makes it out of the two if they split, essentially. So it's going to be one of these things that if you look at it like that, maybe F4Q does better against Sentinels. And if that's the case, then they advance if they split. So yeah, I want G2 to do well. I'm not sure if they will, simply because having an O2 stain against Sentinels is not going to sit well. And then if you're having to, basically set the tone and dominate F4Q just to make it out, I mean, those guys have a lot less pressure on them. They come into the tournament expecting to maybe lose. So if they just go in there with the expectation of let's just go all out, I mean, if G2 plays too strict and too much by the book, the F4Q might just run all over them and they may not know what to do and how to adapt. And, kind of those teams that have that, nothing to lose attitude, they're the dangerous ones to look at.
There's also a lot to look at when it comes to keloqz. This is going to be a huge challenge for him. Yeah. And coming up against TenZ a lot of the time in some of those early duels, this is a guy that loves to really fight early. I'm very concerned about G2 in that respect. If they have him firing on all cylinders, really making it work on the jet, then okay, we can have a conversation about that being a tight game, because you look at some of the star-studded players that you have on this G2 roster. You've got the likes of Nukia, who might well be he's one of the top 5 players in the world right now. He is unbelievable, and I still don't think he's hit his peak. We've seen mixwell reach new heights when he comes to playing the Viper kind of Sentinel role. He had those like 30 bomb icebox
Adjusted
games.
really well.
Like, I really think G2 has so much potential looking at them, but looking at how they played previously, maybe it was a lack of preparation, lack of focus, whatever it was, they did not perform to where I wanted them to. And I, as a first challenge to take on Sentinels, it's going to be a pretty big test for whatever preparation they have been doing.
Yeah, my biggest worry here with G2 is that they get suffocated by Sentinels and then they'll struggle to find their ground, you know, like they just get overrun a little bit. So certainly going to be interesting. I think Sentinels topping the group is going to be easy enough, but that second slot, come on, give me some names, fRoD. Who do you think is going to take it? Is it just going to be G2, or do you believe in the F4Q getting it done?
I think F4Q is going to get it done, unless they can at least maybe take G2 can take a page out of the Fnatic playbook when it comes to unleashing Durka. If they can kind of do that with Koldamenta, let him do his thing, let him go all out, I think that that's the edge that they're going to need. If they try and play too structured, too by the book, I think that it's going to be very difficult for them, and I'm going to have to go with F4Q there, to be honest.
Can I...
Mitch?
Right. This is a really tough one.
Your bias versus your brain.
I know, it's tough. It really is. And just to make a quick comparison before I make that point, fRoD, I guess you would say TenZ is an aggressive player, right?
Yeah, super aggressive.
Describe him as super aggressive. Exactly. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. So he participates in roughly 33% of the opening duels, either winning or losing. In every round, 33% of the rounds, he will get the first kill or die. Kellogg's in EMEA playoffs, it was at 39%. That is a significant hike higher than where TenZ was. And that just goes to show what I'm saying, that these two guys are going to be dueling all the time. They're going to be taking those fights. And TenZ has already proven himself in multiple esports that he is a tier 1 competitor. He's at the top level and he's able to deliver. Kellogg's is not. And for an opening game, like I said, they've been working a lot, I'm sure. But this is they have no trial run. They have no opportunity to kind of get a feeling in and make some changes. They're going to have to take Sentinels the first time around, and sure, they have time to adapt afterwards, but it's just going to be so tough. I'm going to say they make it through still. I think that they should beat F4Q, but it will be a very, very close call between the two, and Sentinels will top the group.
So now, guys, we do get to have some fun after looking at these groups, and it's time to put your crypto where your mouth is with bold predictions presented by DJ Esports. All right, Mitch, so on bold predictions, I know your bias loves to kick in, but what are we looking at here, mate? How are you feeling on maybe some of these opening games, and which team's going to take the whole thing?
Okay, so opening games wise, as much as I'd love to say that it's going to be like having Liberty taking down 100 Thieves, or Stars taking Envy, which, hey, possibilities. There's possibilities there. I'm going to say Vision Strikers are going to beat pAura. Ooh, I'm a very bold predictor here. But that's not really my bold prediction per se. I think they'll win their opening game. I think they'll do it 2-0. I don't necessarily think pAura will hit double digits if you combine the two maps together. Pistol rounds excluded, let's say, just to be safe. But I think the Vision Strikers are going to do the same when it comes to the second game. I think they're going to beat SuperMassive Blaze or Acend, whichever team they come up against. I'm not going to say it's going to be 2-0, let's say. I think that will be a close one. But I can see Vision Strikers topping the group and making a deep run all the way to the end of the tournament.
All right. And what about your team to win the entire thing?
Well, that has to be Gambit. I mean, of course, it has to be Gambit. I'll maybe put Sentinels in the top 3 as well, but I can see Vision Strikers making it into 3rd place.
I like it. I like it. Let's see how it goes down. But fRoD, what are we looking at in terms of your bold prediction?
Yeah, when it comes to that, I would have to say that Envy is going to probably just demolish their group, to be honest with you. I think that they're going to 2-0 every team. I think it's going to be pretty straightforward for them. Just get in there, get...
Even Zeta?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the thing is that the way that Envy is kind of being built now is much different than before, where they were maybe more of a strat teamwork heavy team before. Not saying that they're not that now, but now when they have that El Diablo element, it's just that extra level of like, they just let him go do his thing. Like, Envy was always a team that with 3 guys or 4 guys alive, they could still be dangerous and win a round. So now if you have someone like Ye in the mix, that you can kind of just have him be that anomaly, like some rounds you could be with us and let's go like take a bomb site together, or some rounds, yo, just go do your thing, we'll be over there. I mean, the fact that he can do something like that, I think it's going to be like an element that, you know, that sort of TenZ style that Sentinels has. I think Envy's going to start, you know, flourishing with that. They're going to start showcasing what they've been working on, because they've only been a roster and a team for about a month with Ye in there. So I really think they're going to clean house, to be honest. 2-0s like across the board. I wouldn't even really call it that much more bold, but I think NA is going to place top 3 in the tournament, to be honest, depending on how the format's going to go and how everything goes. I'm not sure if Sentinels is going to be the team that does win the tournament, simply because you never really know. Maybe it is going to be Envy, maybe it's going to be 100 Thieves, but I do think that an NA team is going to win this tournament.
So wait, when
yeah.
you say NA teams in the top 3, do you mean that all 3 NA teams will be the top 3?
Yeah, I think we're taking home all the medals is what I was trying to say.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, you've got on a Mitch style swerve
sorry.
here, fRoD.
Well, I'm trying to back it up by the fact that I think that at least the format lends to it. Because if for example, like, we're all going to make it out of our groups for the most part. If NA makes it out of their groups in number 1 spot 2, they're also not going to play each other in the first round. That means they're going to be all set up to basically have, you know, 2 NA teams and then one NA and one non-NA team in the semifinals. It's gonna, like, the format lends to it. So I understand that you guys are saying, oh, he's from NA, the bias is there, but looking at it from like that, like the outsider lens, if we do place first in every group, we won't be playing each other first round in the bracket stage. So it is set up for us to make it to the semifinals. That's 4 spots.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, if Gambit and Zeta Division weren't there, yeah, you could place first in all the groups, but unfortunately, you're going to get Sentinels top of their group and the others maybe making it out. So unlucky.
I never want this show to stop, just so I can enjoy this as I just laugh away at you two. I'm going to throw my one into the mix of it, right? And my bold prediction, at least in the opening match, because I think.
Oh, sorry.
No, Mitch, no, we're not doing that. Don't send me down onto that. That's just mean. I actually think F4Q will win that first game against G2. And I think it'll be a bit of a surprise to G2, but then they'll bounce back. You know, I can see them working their way through it, and I still think it'll be Sentinels and G2 making out the group. But I feel like in that game, there is potential where G2 maybe weren't expecting something coming out of F4Q, and they can fight back a bit. Maybe a bit of warm-up needed for the G2 players. It really depends how they kick things off with, because it's going to be a tough game for sure, and it's going to be the first one where they have to clash against this kind of team, you know? And remember, G2 have not been on LAN with this being able to play in this way, so I think that's going to be the one it goes down to. But I do know that G2's preparation and the individuals that we spoke about at any point could run it over, but I'm keeping an eye on that one as like maybe F4Q can pull off the upset. And Mitch, I'm actually agreeing with you for once, even though this isn't coming down to EMEA bias, this is the CIS bias of it. I think Gambit will win the whole thing. I think they are more than ready. Like, mentally they look good. The team seems to be in a good position, haven't got over there now. Like I said, I was speaking from Nats earlier. Thieves
in there, you know.
and I think that the Gambit system is going to work very well for them. It will definitely not be easy. Like, I'm not going to say they're going to run it completely and just roll over people, but I am super excited if we get a Gambit versus Sentinels matchup. That would be a grand final I'm all down for. Haven't lost my mind?
No, I think you're good there, man. I mean, because at the end of the day, for like even like 100 Thieves, for example, this is a team that the less we talk about them, the better they do, it seems. So this is like...
Hey, I spoke about them when they did well.
Well, exactly. But you're the only one that spoke about them, right? And,
yeah,
and
true,
actually
true.
Credit to you there, because that's the only real time that we've like highlighted them in some of these things. So this is one of those events that we don't really talk about them as much, but they're always doing better. So I'm kind of nervous. Like, I'm a CS fanboy in that case. I prefer Gambit to win. But since we've not talked about 100 Thieves and we're kind of almost underestimating them in some sort of way, if they make it out of their group first, and obviously Gambit, I'm sure, will be satisfied with making it, you know, second place. I think that's why I kind of had that prediction of the top 3, but you never know. I mean, 100 Thieves, like, they're also going to be top team, but man, Gambit is one of those teams that I think that everyone is excited to watch.
All right, before we close the show, and I'm hoping the producer's just going to allow me to do this because I want to rock with this. You've given us your top 3 of how you think it's going to go, but fRoD, I'm going to ask you for the names in a second. My top 3 is going to be Gambit, Sentinels, 100 Thieves. Mitch, what's yours?
I'm going to say Gambit.
Good man.
I'm going to say Gambit, Sentinels, Vision Strikers.
Ooh, okay. fRoD?
I like it, and it's very possible. I mean, yeah. I actually like his a lot. I just think that, you know, I'm going to go ahead and stick with mine. I'm going to say...
What order?
What order? Sentinels.
Yep.
Envy. 100
Oh,
Thieves.
no. Oh, fRoD.
Sorry.
Okay,
I'm doing it.
you've been harping on a little bit about Envy, so I'll give you that. You've stuck to your guns on it. We'll have to see how it all pans out, but we are done for another episode of Curveball presented by DJ Esports. Thank you very much for watching once again. We'll be enjoying all the Valorant action going down in Berlin. A huge LAN, a lot on the line, and the biggest event so far in Valorant history.